Jess, how are you doing?
I am very good. Thank you very much for having me.
It's so good to have you on. Obviously, we've been speaking at Ming a few times, and I've seen you out networking, and you're one of the partners of Ming, one of the sponsors. So you regularly sort of share insights and stories from some of the people that you've helped and supported along the way. So I'm very excited to have you on this evening to share with our audience all the amazing work that SureStay Group do.
Mm.
But what I like to do before we get into the thick of it is I like to take it right back to the beginning and sort of really delve into your career and your experience that led you up to property. And am I right in saying you had a really successful career in marketing before you stumbled across property? Is that right?
I did, yes. That was my background, similar to you. I had a marketing background. So now, for anyone who knows me now, obviously, as you say, I run SureStay Group, and we are a company that creates safe homes for families who are leaving unsafe situations. So they're our customers, and our investors are our customers too. And that preceding that is a few years in property, and then preceding that is 16, 18 odd years in marketing. So exactly, that was my first career.
Well, this is a property webinar, and I'd love to do a series on marketing webinars because marketing is one of my absolute loves. What kind of things were you doing in marketing? What sort of business was it that you were working for, and how was that sort of taking shape?
Completely by chance, my career started in a startup commercial property brokerage just because that was the only gig I could get when I graduated. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm moving to London and getting a grad scheme, and no one employed me, so I got a job there. It was a small startup, so it was kind of very general, but I was helping them market within the broker network. So doing research on portfolios, putting together marketing materials, a lot of coordination between trading corporate brokers really. And then I went on to go and work for ING Real Estate Investment Management in their acquisitions team, helping very similarly put on broker events, building launch events, research, putting together portfolio marketing materials, marketing to their mailing lists to promote their latest deals. And I wasn't at all intending to get into property at that point. Maybe it subconsciously had an effect on me. And then I spent 15 odd years in global marketing agencies, serving B2B, so business to business marketing operations. My role was always in client servicing. So my role was account management, coming up with strategies for clients to help them achieve their marketing objectives as a business, and then running the team to deliver on the plan that we created. And then there was an element of new business growth as well. So it's actually really played really well into what I do now because, firstly, it was the strategy, what's going to work for this objective. That's exactly where you start when you're in property. This is what I want to achieve. What do I need to do to get there? And then I was in a service role, so I was constantly answerable to client budgets, and they were ranging to quite large budgets, and they were quite big, well-known companies that were my clients. And they were my stakeholders, and exactly as I'm answerable to my investors now and I'm responsible for their money, I had the exact same role with my marketing career, helping my clients make sure their budget was being well looked after. And then, as I say, organizing the team to deliver the campaigns that we said that we would deliver, whether that was launching a new software product or rebranding a tech platform or those kinds of things. I absolutely loved it. There was digital, there was events, there was brand, there was all sorts. I absolutely loved that. And then I got tired of it, and now I don't do it.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you experienced this, but it's always a shock to the system when you're lucky enough to or in a position where you can deal with large client budgets or large marketing budgets, and then you start your own business, and that budget doesn't exist in the same way,
Yeah.
and organic becomes the key phrase because you've no longer got those
Yeah.
budgets to manage, and it's a bit of
Yeah.
a shock to the system.
It is, and you don't have, an SEO specialist or a paid specialist doing the things for you. You have to learn. I know what it will achieve, but I don't know how to do it. So yeah, because I had teams of people working alongside me. So yeah, it was very, very different kettle of fish.
It's almost as if you go full circle because funnily enough, I started my marketing career for a property finance brokerage
Okay.
because it was literally the job that I could get. You know,
Yeah.
they wanted someone, and it was jack of all trades, literally dealing with SEO to event management to structuring rebrands and campaigns and you name it. And
Yeah.
it's almost as if then I went into a larger corporate where my uh, experience was specifically dealing with social media and like
Okay.
a very, very small part of organic social media in a big sort of department. And then now I've gone full circle trying to be the jack of all trades and
Yeah.
trying to keep all the different marketing plates spinning. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating how you sort of go full circle with that. So
Well, well done, because you just said you've reached nearly 3,000 members, so you're obviously spinning the plates well.
yeah, well, I'm really grateful actually because a lot of the people that are on this call tonight have been sort of massive advocates for us and have massively promoted us. So although I'm sort of doing the marketing behind it, it's that old cliche of that word of mouth is definitely the best form of marketing, and that has certainly supported us in terms of reaching that 3,000. So yeah,
Mm.
if you're listening, guys, very grateful. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
But yeah, Jess is in terms of you and your marketing career, um, it sounds like there was a property element within marketing. Is that what's first sort of lit the touch paper in terms of deciding that you wanted to go into a property role? How did property come about?
Not at all, actually. And my property marketing, the property industry, working in the property industry within marketing only lasted about 3 years. And after that, it was mostly tech brands like HP and Vodafone Global Enterprise and companies like that. So it really wasn't that at all. What it was when I'd done okay in my career and I was looking at women ahead of me in my career and I was watching them have choices made for them about what they could sacrifice and what they couldn't. So they could either work on a really big, amazing pitch that would have a really great impact on the revenue of the company, or they could be more present for their family because it takes a lot to lead a pitch in an agency or to run a new campaign or to lead a new client or that kind of, it takes a lot. And I was noticing brilliant brains have choices made for them, or perhaps they had a role in making that choice, but it wasn't completely theirs about between their family and their business. And that really, their family and their career. And that really had an impact on me and made me say, I want to still use my brain and progress my career. And someday I want to have a family, but I want to choose what those sacrifices are and I want to choose the compromises that I make. And I don't want anybody else dictating those to me. And so I decided to start something of my own, and I tried a couple of other things, which I was totally rubbish at, like network marketing. I worked with a couple of brands. I was rubbish. And I didn't really apply myself to learning the skills to be good at those. And at the same time, I had bought my first property a couple of years prior in London in a real dive of an area, up and coming. And I'd spent everything I could on getting my first property. I think it was about 28, maybe something like that. And so I'd bought that. I'd spent a bit of money on renewing the lease, putting damp course in, doing a few basic improvements, and I'd bought really well. I was slightly limited by how much I could afford, but also I was paying attention to where would increase in value, and I made a really good profit on that. And I was also going to webinars about entrepreneurship and learning about Rich Dad Poor Dad and learning all these things. And everything sort of came together in one go. I knew I didn't want to be beholden in my career. I knew I was rubbish at network marketing and other kinds of independent sales things. I loved the process of the tangible aspect of bricks and mortar, and I'd grown that value with my own work, which was kind of similar to what I'd been doing in the events part of my marketing. There was stuff I could touch that I had made and come up with, and I loved it. And then I had this pot of cash from the property doing well, and I'd been learning about it. And I just thought, I'm going to do this. And I invested in a property course, which is where I met my business partner, Mark, 8 odd years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And then I learned about HMOs and flips, and that's what I started doing.
Amazing. So you took sort of your property in London. Was that was that one to live in, or what did you do with?
Yeah, it was mine to live in. I bought it for me. At that time, I didn't have the intention of growing a portfolio. And then I went traveling when I was 30 for a year and rented it out to firstly a friend and then a really scary guy who didn't pay rent and told me to my face he didn't have any intention of doing it and I couldn't throw him out. That was my first experience of being a landlord.
At least he was honest.
It was honest. I went in. I remember so clearly. I felt very small. I'm 5'6", and he was clear over 6 foot and quite a broad guy. And I just went over to see what was going on. I said, he said, I'm not going to pay rent. I said, you just to be clear, are you telling me you're going to stay in the property and you're not going to pay any rent and you're not going to leave? Is that what you're saying? And he said, yeah. Um, and my dad was like, you've got to change the locks. I was like, I can't. His wife's about to have a baby. So yeah, that was my first experience of landlording. But I'd bought it to live in. And then when I sold that, I used the money to pay for an expensive financial mistake, buy my first HMO and buy my first project property for my home, my
Mm.
next home.
Yeah, that's quite a jump in terms of going from your first buy to let to a HMO, which is yeah, so many moving parts and that. So in terms of where you were focusing in terms of area, was that HMO in London as well?
No, it was in Coventry and I still have that.
All right, cool. Yeah, I know Coventry very well. That's where I am.
Yes, you do. You are from there. That's where the bulk of my portfolio is. Because I'm from the Midlands, I'm from Shropshire, so I know like the area across the Midlands reasonably well. And when I originally did my analysis, that was the area that I chose for my HMOs. I chose Coventry. And then I had moved to London, and then I moved to Brighton. And after a few years of doing that, um, I then met my now partner, and we decided that we'd move up to the Midlands because managing it and trying to grow it from Brighton was harder than I wanted it to be. And so we moved, but it's always been in the Midlands.
But really early on from your career, you've really diversified your portfolio, which is what that's the sort of golden rule is to not put all your eggs in one basket in one particular place. So was that something that you did as a result of the training, or was that something that you just instinctively wanted to pursue, or how did that come about?
I knew that I wanted to buy, and I knew that I didn't have very much money. So I knew that I needed to borrow money to do that from private investors. And so it was really important to me not just to have the HMO. Every HMO that I bought, I knew that it worked financially, but I wanted to develop a pot of cash alongside it, just so that if anything went really badly wrong that I hadn't predicted, I had a backup of money. So the dual strategy of HMO and flips was the best way for me to offer the security and my own peace of mind because I wanted to be not, I was pushing myself, but I didn't want to overstretch myself to the point that I couldn't deliver to the properties or to my investors who I started working with pretty early on in my portfolio development.
Absolutely. Tell me about some of the flips. What sort of projects were you working on?
They've always been my home that I've always lived in short term.
Right.
And I've done that for, it's a good strategy, growing your pot without the additional stamp and, it's good for tax and that kind of thing. So I've always bought, so when I sold the flat in Streatham, which was the first one that I mentioned, I bought a really rundown property in a beautiful building in Brighton and renovated it. And I knew that I was going to add loads of value. It's all the houses I've bought for myself. They've been deliberately chosen to live in short term, where I've bought them because they really need some love. And I like the process of doing it. And that's been the strategy. It's in my own personal name for my own home to give me a pot of cash to either put into the business, which I've done a lot. And I had a call with my accountant today and realized quite why I feel so poor because loads of it's in the businesses. And as I say, for backup for investors.
Yeah, I mean, when I was dealing with particularly developers that were going in and doing flips, the biggest sort of concern to them was the time frame in terms of the quicker they can do the flip and get it back out onto the open market, particularly if they were on a bridge, the more profitable the flip would be. But in terms of your position and being able to live in those properties, takes a lot of pressure off in terms of how soon you. I'm presuming it would take a lot of pressure off in terms of how much time you needed to get that back ready out onto the open market, particularly if
Yeah.
you're actually living in the property. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
it's nice if you needed to do that much work to it, but yeah,
Yeah.
would you say it would take the pressure off a bit?
Yeah, totally. If this was on a bridge, I'd treat it very differently. I'd have a totally different attitude to it because of the need for speed. Totally. It's a completely different approach. But also, for example, this house we that I'm sitting in now, we it's unencumbered because when we bought it, neither of us were mortgageable. So it's what we could buy at the
Mm,
time. Because my other half, he works for himself as well, and his business collapsed in lockdown because it's based on performing arts industry, and so he's had to rebuild it. So, and I moved from the security of a job and freelance income to just property. So, we bought this as best we could, but the money that we have is tied up and we can't use it until we do refinance it. So there isn't a cost to us, but there's an opportunity cost that we're
yeah.
losing by having the money in here.
And what sort of let's anyone that's listening to this that is potentially going down the flip route themselves, how have you found those flips, those deals, and what kind of things are you looking for in flips? Because some people will purely look at stuff that they can cosmetically go in. I think there's a bit of a sliding scale in terms of, a bit of decor, maybe a new kitchen, new bathroom, and then put it back out on the open market. And then there's some people a little bit more hardcore that would look for full structural issues that potentially would need a cash purchase rather than
Yeah.
mortgageable.
I mean, I'm okay. So the we have so just thinking back over the last few, they've always had a value add beyond a cosmetic refit. So this one, there was a structural concern, there was no parking. I can't remember, there were three main issues we were going to fix: structural, parking, and something else. Um, so they've always been a bit, and we've added value by converting this from a two bed to a three bed. The previous one, we added value by doing a large extension, totally bringing it, totally remodeling it. So they're not 20 grand jobs at
Mm,
all. They're much more involved than that. Um, and the approach has been, because I know the area, because I live there really well. I suppose I know the investment area really well as well, but I know what the good streets are. So it's kind of a case of the worst property on the best street. It's kind of been a bit of that. That's really worked really well for us, and we've broken the ceiling price a couple of times on the properties that we've done because we know the market, and we know how to make a good product because we've done it a few times, that answers the needs of that market. So that's been really fun. But similarly, this is a financial growth strategy, but I don't use investor money for it. So when I talk about my portfolio, really, I'm talking about the side where the HMOs and the flats where investor money is. That's just how I delineate it in my brain. But there, I've also bought properties which have structural issues or planning issues or that kind of thing, and that's always where value's created.
mm,
And I learned there was a deal that I did. I bought it in 2021, two, and it went from a three-bed HMO to a really big seven-bed HMO. It wasn't pokey or awful. It was really lovely luxury HMO. And that deal, more than anything, taught me that you make a good deal. You don't buy one. You really make it. And you have to trust yourself and dig deep and not accept no and keep asking and that kind of thing. But you really make them. But buying with issues is a good way to give yourself scope for that.
mm. Yeah, 100%. So obviously you've done a few projects in terms of flips and in terms of the HMO side of things. Um, what sort of started your journey with SureStay Group? Like you said that you met Mark on a training program, and yeah, what I want to know was what was the motivation from moving from HMOs to something a little bit more meaningful in terms of the sort of impact that you're having, not just on sort of local communities, but in terms of the individuals that are
Yeah.
actually that are living in those homes.
It was really interesting actually because it's kind of unfolded to me in little clues along the way. And the more I've listened to them and acted upon them, the more real this part of my career has become. And I think that's a really massive learning actually for me is just listen to what the little voices are saying to you, not the crazy ones, just the intuition ones.
Yeah.
Probably that too. But I don't know about you, but when I started working in property, I always told myself, when I've done this, then I can do that. When I have replaced my salary, then I can do property work that means something to me, or then I can blah, 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 blah. And I had created this totally fabricated, fairly logical, but very head driven, not heart driven. When I've made this much money, then I can do that. Or when I've proved myself, or when I've done this many projects, there was always something further away. Then I could start doing more impactful property work. Because alongside the HMOs and the flips, I was a trustee at a mental health charity and I was volunteering and working alongside a housing association. And I wanted to learn more about vulnerable people and how I could support them. And some people who are much braver than me go headfirst and just figure it out along the way. And I wanted to learn first and then go into it, but always alongside that, always in the HMOs that I was developing, it was always really important to me to create spaces where people flourish and they feel safe and grounded and secure, and that they can kind of let it all out and rebuild if they need to, and really healing spaces. That was always really important to me, but I was capping it because I was doing professional HMOs and I wasn't really properly digging into what I wanted to do with that. And really interestingly, I'm part of a network called the Property Sisters, and one of the Property Sisters has a podcast called Focus on Why. She's called Amy Rawlinson, and it's all about interviewing people, understanding what drives them. And I was one of the first persons she interviewed, and she asked me to being interviewed for that made me think about why I was doing what I was doing more than I had ever thought about it before. And in that moment, I realized why it was so important to me to create places where people felt safe. And I realized it's because I hadn't always had that myself. I left home when I was 16, and my mum was with a horrible person, and I left home because of him. And it impacted the choices that I'm making now. And I had no idea that it was doing that. I was trying to create safe spaces or places where people could heal because I didn't feel like I'd always had that. I was very loved by my family and they gave me a great grounding, but that was a big impact in my life. Leaving home at 16 is quite young, and the reasons we're doing it were quite impactful. Um, so I didn't know that that was driving me until Amy asked me in 2021. Bear in mind, I was born in 81. So that happened when I in 97. And I didn't realize that was impacting my career until 2021. So that was rich. She really dug that out of me. And then the second thing that made me think I want to change now, I've done enough property for finance, I need to do property for value now, was in 2023. I was a finalist in the Property Investor Awards HMO of the Year, which is an awards ceremony which is in London every year. It's well known in the circuit. And I was one of 6 finalists amongst a couple of my friends, actually. And they were calling the finalists, and I'd invited my builders down and spent loads of money on their tickets and everything. And they were about to call the winner. And I actually looked around the room and I thought, I really don't care. I don't care. I'm proud of my work and I'm proud of what I've given my investors and my tenants and what I've made because I wanted to and I thought, set out to, and I did what I had done and I was proud of that. But I didn't really care. And I realized that actually it didn't mean anything unless I integrated the volunteering and the kind of trustee work that I was doing and the property work. And that in that moment in that room, I decided to integrate it and change. And I'd known Mark, and following that, we spent several months trying to find opportunities to work together and really force something. And we didn't manage to. And then I viewed a block of flats. I was offered a block of flats off market at the end of 23, that very close to that time. And I couldn't make it stack for what I knew to do. And I called Mark and I talked it through with him. And I said, "Do you think this could work for the homeless model that you work with?" And we went through the numbers and we decided that it would, and this would be our route to working together because we'd wanted to for probably about a year at that point.
Mm.
Um, and that's what we did. So we went for it. And there were loads and loads and loads of challenges along the way. And it was another example of a good deal is made and not bought. But that's how those three things were how I ended up here. That was quite a long answer, sorry.
Perfect. And it really got me thinking because I remember someone saying to me once, and it almost sounds like your career has been guided by your subconscious through
Yeah, I
it's
guess
not
so.
been necessarily a conscious decision in terms of why you've gone down that route up until the point where you've decided, no, this is what I want to do. But it's almost like you're subconsciously it's been guiding you because someone once told me that the best marketers in the world are empaths because they are able to understand what people are feeling and most importantly how they are going to emotionally respond to your product or your piece of marketing, which is particularly if you've been in a traumatic situation and you know that you've had to leave home at 16 and um, you are a lot more in touch with the way people feel, and you particularly if you're around someone that doesn't necessarily respect other people's emotions, it makes you super heightened to how other people feel, and
Yeah.
that's what makes the best marketers. And it sounds that in terms of that when you were creating these projects and stuff, that was the idea of creating a home was for you in terms of building sort of something more meaningful, but there was always another step to go in terms of the people that were extremely vulnerable that needed that help. So it really sort of set off my imagination as you were saying that, Jess. So thanks for sharing that. So let's go into the real weeds of it in terms of you found your first project, you're now partnered up with Mark, and tell me about what that first project was like. What was the objective? Who was it that you were looking to support? What was the how did you go about starting from identifying the opportunity to really starting to house vulnerable people?
Well, we had a bit of a head start because Mark and I are a really good marriage of business partners because his experience is working with councils
Mm.
to provide, to find and source housing for their needs. And my experience is developing buildings and working with investors. And neither of us had really done what the other one of us does. So we had a head start with each other by combining those skills, which was fantastic. The property we bought from someone who we both know, and it took a very long time to buy. We agreed, I viewed it on December the 22nd. We were told we needed to act quickly. Our offer was accepted on the 31st of January, and we were told we'd be completed by March, and we eventually completed in September 2024. So it took an extra 6 months because it was quite a complicated back-to-back trade. We were buying something that somebody was trading on. Um, so yeah, he was buying portfolio, splitting it up. We were buying part of it. They were keeping some of it. So it was complicated to wait. But in terms, but then we knew that there were obstacles that meant we were originally going to get lending on buying it, and there were quite a few things that meant we were very restricted on what lenders we could work with, and in the end we couldn't work with any, and we funded it privately at the last minute. So that was fun. But in terms of figuring out who it was for, I mean, we always just fully trusted that Mark had already put in, he's been working with councils for years and he'd kind of done the what we thought was the hard work in getting us those, well, security of tenants really. But we learned quite early on that the model we were using would work financially, and we pivoted to emergency housing. And but staying absolutely true to what we want to do, we joined because we both care about housing vulnerable families who are homeless, and that is what we intended to do in the original financial model, and that's what we still do now in the emergency housing model. But yeah, so we've had to sort of not start from scratch because we've had some internal referrals, but we have had to work much harder than we expected to build relationships with different council officers who deal with emergency housing instead of just normal LHA tenants. So that has been a real learning curve for us, and it's delayed us quite a lot building those relationships, but we think we're there now.
So I think there's with certain politicians and certain newspapers, there has been a demonization of certain people that find themselves in these situations and that need the level of support that you offer. For absolute clarity, could you share with our audience what kind of situations the people that come to you find themselves in,
Yeah,
or the ways that you're supporting them?
yeah. So we're a housing provider. We're not a supported living provider. So we work with, I'll give some specific examples to answer that in the best way. I always think, that's the best way to understand something. We work with councils. They pay our rent under their, and they put people in our homes who literally Mark is on the tenant side. He might get a call at 9 o'clock tomorrow for somebody moving in tomorrow night. It's emergency and they're fleeing situations. So they are either homeless, the first, or they are fleeing domestic violence. They're those two categories. And they are nearly every family in our block is a single mum with a child who's about 2. And for our planning, they have to be under 10, but that's fine because that matches really well with who the councils need to house. The first lady who came to us, she came to us at 1 day's notice. She had been incorrectly placed in a HMO in London with her then 18-month-old son. Her and her son were in a 10-room HMO in London. They had one room. They didn't know anyone else. She was trying to raise a child. They didn't know anyone else in the HMO, and it was kind of scary. And then her partner was beating her up. And so somebody else in the HMO called the social workers and they came and took her away. But she went to the council office and nobody could help her. And her and her son went to sleep on the sofas in the waiting room of the council offices. That's where they slept. And someone, I think she said it was a cleaner or an office worker or somebody was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, we haven't got anywhere to go. They haven't given us a home and we can't go back there." And she said, "Well, come and sleep on our sofa." So this woman, the office worker, took this strange woman and her son to her home and they slept there. So this mother, who's now our tenant, took her son to a stranger's home. I would feel so scared doing that. I don't know what would be worse, sleeping in an office or sleeping in a stranger's house with my not quite 2-year-old. And then from the next day, she has been our tenant since January last year. And the transformation in her is unbelievable. She was scared and timid. Her son was kicking off and playing up, and now they welcome everyone. She's confident, she's outgoing, she's loving. She probably was already those things. They'd just been sort of beaten out of her a bit. Um, so that's a typical person, and they're usually fleeing domestic violence or fleeing homelessness in some way. Um, yeah, that's who we house.
Wow. Yeah, it's quite a
Yeah, we've had some really difficult situations, really difficult. We've had to up our game more than we expected in safeguarding. We didn't expect that safeguarding would be such a big part of SureStay Group, and it has become that. We've developed all sorts of policies to keep our tenants safe, all sorts of measures in the buildings. We've invested more money than we thought we would need to, which is fine. We just were blind to it because it's I do professional HMOs and flips. Um, So it's been a real eye opener. We've had somebody who was using the space for her online account, let's put it that way, while her
Right.
son was there. And she had people visiting the building who shouldn't have been there for that purpose. Um, and we have to think of everybody else in the building and their safety. We've
Yeah.
had somebody else report domestic violence that they could hear in the building, reporting it in a different flat. That's
Mm.
very upsetting to deal with, very, very triggering for me, very, very upsetting for everybody in the building because that's what their own situation is. They're trying to get strong from that too. So we work very closely with the councils um, to keep them safe, to understand what their needs are, and with our managing team to make sure we've got the policies in place to look after them. And we want for us ins to do more and more and more of that. It really means a lot to us.
Yeah. So in terms of once they're settled, do you have much support in terms of looking after them while when they're in the property, or is that
No, we don't have that role to play.
sure?
They have a social worker. So that's the social worker's job, but we are sort of the eyes and ears of that. It's we've built a really amazing team. The tenants have trust with Mark. The cleaning team sort of is our eyes and ears, and she's really amazing. The lady who leads the team is really amazing at that. And we all sort of report back and keep an eye on everybody, really. And I hope that as we grow, we keep that exactly the same. Um, but it's yeah, we have a sort of duty of care as far as being a landlord goes, but because we've created a sort of grey area for ourselves because we don't have the technical responsibility, but we do feel responsible. So we want to care for our tenants. And what's been so nice is the people that we've worked with, the builders, the managing agents, particularly the investors, all are invested in what we're doing and want to better that in their own way or grow it or help to add to it in some way, which has been really great. Everyone, some people do it for the feel good, some people do it because they have a personal reason to care too. But we've really kind of attracted people who share the values that we have.
And is there a danger of obviously with the sort of the level of vulnerability in the people that you're supporting or that are giving homes to? Is there a danger for someone that's listening to this that might be interested in getting involved? So a danger of becoming emotionally connected to these people, and is it quite difficult to take some of those stories home with you?
Yeah, like I've it's really hard. I've been like crying on the phone to Mark, being like, okay, let's just, big breath. We've got to deal with this. I can't cry about it. We've got to deal with this, change the policy, change the locks, do this, do that, but it is upsetting. But we aren't a social worker, so we're not required to get involved. But of course, Mark is sort of likes being more friendly with them. I like to stay detached.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, even hearing some of the stories that you're telling on this, it's given an emotional reaction to me, based on
Sorry. I
just
hope I haven't
no,
already become hardened to it like a police officer or care worker would be. I hope I haven't already developed that.
not at all. No, it's just it does when you hear that real stories, it does cause you to feel something, and I think that's only natural for someone getting into involved in this area of work.
Yeah.
So
I mean, actually, just on that, like there was a few. So, as you mentioned, I'm a sponsor of Ming, SureStay Group is. And at the beginning of Ming, all the sponsors stand at the beginning of the room and we just say 60 seconds what we do and how people could benefit from that. And once it was before Christmas, I couldn't stop crying. I was trying to do 60 seconds and I just felt this lump grow in my throat. And it was because, so my daughter's 4, and I house children who are 2, 3, 4. And the parallel, there was one particular time, that time I couldn't stop crying in my 60 seconds. I had just been to her nativity play and all the kids had sung like some song about all the golden opportunities of the world. And I just thought, you've got no idea. kids got no idea. And then, dealing with that in my day-to-day life, it was just so sad that that is reality for some children, and I just couldn't contain myself. So, but that's just, that's just how I can't filter that out
Yeah,
of
statistically,
myself.
some of those kids having to sing that song will be in a similar situation to some of the, the people that you have to give homes to. So yeah, it's horrible. But I do remember that Ming session, and yeah, you battled through it, and
I'm
you
not
did the
sure.
60 seconds, and it was brilliant. But I think a lot more people connected with you in the room when you did, that you share that emotion because it's real and it does cut deep. So yeah, guys, if you've got any questions for Jess, please do put them in the chat. We've had a couple come in already, so I'm going to get round to those as quickly as possible. But before we do, Jess, in terms of SureStay Group, how can people get involved? What are some of the projects you're working on at the moment? If anyone wants to find out anything more, what can they do to reach out?
Okay. So if people want to get involved, there are three ways to do that. And as I say, people have loved sharing in our mission, like to do that. They can. We're trying to grow. So if somebody knows a building that's for sale that we can turn into flats for more families who need these homes, obviously please tell us about it. Of course, there'd be introductory fees and that kind of thing. Well, that goes without saying, but it's we just want to create more of those homes. Other ways are if you are a service provider who wants to, so for example, or if you're a builder or a kitchen provider or a flooring provider or I don't know, those kinds of things, a maintenance company who want to know that a portion of your work is being invested back into the community around you, or callously, if you've got a CSR box to tick, it can be as callous as that. Some people actually, only want to be involved because they're able to do that through working with us. That's fine. That still meets our objective. Then that's great. Equally, we grow through buying more, which we do with private investment. We have a pool of investors who we work with, but we're always happy to open that out more. The more funds we have, the more we can grow. The second part of your question was how to find us. So we're surestaygroup.co.uk. Oh, there, actually. Um, I am we're on Instagram, and Mark is Mark Burrows on LinkedIn. I'm Jessica Leader on LinkedIn, or I'm still mostly on my old Instagram, which is an NL Living for Next Level Living. But SureStay Group works. We're on it for LinkedIn and Instagram or our website, but they're the main ways. I'd love to speak to more people. Do you know what? It's been really uniting. At the moment I'm building a sort of boardroom of founders who are mission driven in our work, because it's been amazing to me to align with more people who, yes, we're commercially driven because we run businesses and we're answerable to other people's money as well as our own ambition. But finding through this more and more founders who are mission driven and values driven has been so beautiful, honestly, for me. So I'm building a board at the moment that we can all sort of brainstorm each other and help each other's businesses grow just through sharing ideas together. So that's quite fun. I'm looking forward to that. So very happy to get involved.
I absolutely love that. And you have our full support. And Jess is also available to message in UK Homes Network. So if you
Absolutely.
want to drop her a message after tonight's session, Kate, I know you're after the contact details. So if you drop Jess a message after this, she will be able to reach out to you directly.
Kate,
Um,
are you in? I can see Kate's message. Are you in UK Home Network? Do you want to do like a thumbs up or say yes or no, or just there? Because that would be the easiest, or any of those ways that I've just said.
yeah, absolutely. We can make sure we get those an email address to you. Okay, great stuff. So I'm going to get on to the first question because Ade has been waiting so
Oh,
patiently, dropped us a message just before the hour point, and she's keen to know if you've ever bought from auctions or
yes.
how does it compare to buying from estate agents?
Sorry, that was part of one of your questions before when you're asking about flipping. So we bought one home pre-auction, one home post-auction. I think I've bought three. I bid on blimmin' hundreds of properties in auction, but I think I've got three through auction. How does it compare? I love buying in auction because as long as you know what your numbers are and you feel confident in what the risks are, so you know what your price is and you feel confident enough to know what your costings are going to be once you've bought it to do whatever it is you want to do with it. I love buying through auction. In terms of traditional auction, you just everything's fixed. You know how long you've got to do it in. No one's going to gazump you really because you've exchanged on with the hammer, and you just get on with it. I love it. I love it. And you get used to, if you haven't bought in auction before, there are quite a few things that might sound scary to start with, but you just get used to. Like, for example, if the property's in an auction because it's been repossessed or that kind of thing, then there's certain guarantees that repossessor can't give or information they don't have. But as long as you understand what the risks are, it's safe enough. Honestly, I love buying through auction. Yeah, this house is post auction. We didn't win, and then the next day, the person who won, I don't know, folded, disappeared, ghosted them. I don't know. So we've got it.
And what was your experience like buying through agents?
Um,
Diplomatic answer coming in. I can feel it.
well, agents have become. I struggle to know. I'm sorry if there's one on the phone right now on the
Oh yeah.
call.
Ex
Um,
agent.
okay,
No,
but
you can
the
be as
amount of
honest.
work they have to do has decreased, and so the properties sort of sell themselves as long as they're forthcoming enough, and just what's helpful is in their if they're good at progression, then there's value in an agent really much. If they're really good at helping like a seller feel more calm about a little ruffle that's come along the way and keep them committed, that's really valuable. But generally, agents like it's on the website, it's on Rightmove. If you want it, buy it. We've got offers, whatever. And they don't really have to work very hard. And they don't, it is really my experience. But if you can get in someone's good books, but I find most deals, a lot of people get them on Rightmove. I find them from word of mouth quite a lot of the time. So that's my
I have to
preferred
back you
method.
up on that. If they don't have any experience of sales progression, they don't value the amount of detail and information that they'll need at the start of the sale when they're actually selling the property. That is so true, and it's become more cost effective now, so the agent doesn't have to do the sales progression. They're purely there as a new business to
Yeah.
properties onto the market or selling them or doing the viewings. So yeah, that's I totally get that. Um, you find it a little bit more with independent agents that they seem to be a little bit more on the ball in terms of what's going on because they're a little bit more hands-on the process. But yeah, it has been a case where that you will turn up and they'll effectively chuck the keys at you and let you have a look around the rest of the house.
Yeah, I mean, most of the viewings I've done recently, they've been a Uber agent.
Right.
Just it hasn't even been someone from the agency. It's been a Uber person who doesn't know anything about the property because they don't need to. That's not their job.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a case of, so how old's the boiler? I don't know. I'll get someone to send you an email.
Yeah,
Basic.
exactly that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
value of that role is sort of decreasing, and that's interesting that you say that about they're sort of detaching from the progression process because I recently heard of a quite established platform called Flip, which is trying to let's say I was selling this house, I put it on Flip. All agents can put all their buyers to it. I don't have to pay multiple agent fees. It was quite an interesting way of moving away from how we sell now and just whichever agent has the best buyer wins. And it's true. I don't know where the progression would come from in that scenario. They're all just about winning the sale.
Yeah, it's winning the instruction. That's where the
Yeah.
cash flow comes from, is once you get the property on the market, it pretty much sells itself if it's priced correctly. And that's the issue, which takes out the elements of uh all the variables within a property that can go wrong from a developer's perspective. And
Yeah.
that's the bit you need to get right if you want to work
Yeah.
with long-term sustainable business. But
Yeah.
that's for another webinar because
Yeah.
I could go and stand on a soapbox with that one. But
I
Um,
do I just want to go back to the auction thing. As long as you know what the big red flags are in auctions, like, you know, um, covenants, title restrictions, extra fees, knowing the details of the contract. But ChatGPT is really good if you don't want to chuck every contract to a solicitor to review. Set up a legal advisor in your ChatGPT channels and just use them purely for reviewing contracts. It's quite safe.
Brilliant. David's put a lovely comment. Love that story, Jess. So inspiring and so true. Success isn't measured by a room full of people
Yeah.
who don't know you. What
Thank you.
would Jess recommend the best way for someone to start helping people within the property space whilst it is still making financial sense?
So firstly, make sure the financial sense part is in order. And I would do that by talking to other people who, as many other people as you can, who are doing something similar to what you're curious about doing to understand the realities of what the costs actually are. Because that's the reason that Mark and I pivoted, was because it was slightly different in reality, despite Mark's vast experience. So talk to a lot of people to really understand what your model could be. And then just start connecting with councils and housing associations if that's what you're trying to do, or providers. That's what I would do. I mean, some people think they're going to set up as a provider themselves, whether that's a care provider and a housing provider, which are different. Um, but I think there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of that makes it sound like I'm shy of conforming to regulation. I'm not. There's a lot to do though, if you're going to go down that route. So yeah, I just think start connections are the most valuable thing. And Mark and I have learned that leveraging the connections that we have with the people that we're trying to get to is slightly quicker in a very slow process. But be patient as well. It's taken us ages.
Brilliant. And Kate's put, it was amazing meeting with Jess, but I feel there is much more in details to learn from her.
Well,
And
thanks.
I've absolutely got to agree. I think we've only just scratched the surface, so we'll have to get you back, Jess, in the near future. But thank you so much for joining us and giving up your evening. And your child hasn't broken their promise of
She
breaking
hasn't.
the room and disturbing you while you're mid-webinar. So yeah,
No, she's done very well. Daddy's obviously done his job very well tonight of keeping her up with stories
fantastic.
instead of down here with all of us.
Amazing. But yeah, Jess, thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing such deep and honest stories regarding some of the people that you support. Please, guys, reach out to Jess and the SureStay group
Please
following
do.
this webinar. They are helping so many amazing people, and it would be great for you guys to get involved. We'll be back next week with another webinar. We'll be announcing very soon who that guest is. So please do make sure you use the UK Homes Network app, of course, to message us or any of the people that you've met on tonight's call. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
No, thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.